And to me, that's football, right? It's adrenaline after adrenaline after adrenaline rush. And how can you handle it? How can you stay calm when you need to stay calm? How can you think under pressure and not freak out? And again, sometimes we do, right? Even as coaches, right? But again, it's about practicing and getting ready for that situation.
What's up, beautiful people? Welcome to the Dear Young Athlete podcast, where we talk to coaches and athletes about their journeys and what advice they would have for their younger selves. I'm your host, Jacob Thompson. I'm a speaker, author, and aspiring Paralympian. I've had the privilege and the opportunity to interview over 25 high-level leaders that share their stories and their insights on leadership and how to be successful. We have another great episode coming right up, so let's get into it. Today, I am privileged to be with a very special guest. This man, he won't tell you this, but he's won many state championships, many coaching awards. He's a very humble guy, but hopefully he'll tell us a bit about that. He is above being an amazing, legendary coach. He's a husband. He's a father. He's a man of God. And I cannot wait to hear more of his story. Can't wait to dive in. So without further ado, Carl Fruechte, Coach, how's it going today?
Going well, Jacob. Thank you for that humbling introduction. And I look forward to talking about the Lord and a little bit of football and a little bit about family. So right
Yes. Well, let's dive in. So, excuse me, you've been a coach for, you told me, 36 years.
Yep, 36. Yeah.
But let's bring it back. When you were just growing up, how did you fall in love with sports and with the game of football?
Yeah, that's a great question. Boy, we're really going back, aren't we, Jacob? My mom and dad really, loved sports. It was the late 70s, early 80s. It was a different time, right? The first time you were out for a real sport for us that lived in we lived out in the valley, was, seventh grade football. I always loved football, loved playing in the backyard. You didn't have any youth programs, right? Except for maybe, youth baseball, but we were 6 miles out of town and you couldn't really get in to do that. My dad played high school football in the 50s when they wore leather helmets, and then they got the plastic helmets with the face mask. And I remember him telling me all about it. And, he really enjoyed the game of football. Dad was a big believer that, sports, in general, football, because that's what I coach, was to get young people ready for the hardships and the tough situations that you're going to face in life. Back then, he talked about football is just to get young men ready for real life, and I've always remembered that. But I enjoyed the game. It wasn't anything spectacular, but I enjoyed it. I learned a lot from it. The way I remember it, it was a unique time to grow up in Caledonia. But again, we know that, I love your saying on your picture, everything's for a reason. I know that all the hardships that we went through in the 80s was for me, to have a passion and a growth that I wanted young people to develop into.
Yeah, so bring us into your world a little bit as a high schooler. A lot of times when people like you end up becoming a coach, that could be because they had a bad experience or a good experience with coaches. So what was that like for you?
Yeah, it was, as you look back, Jacob, now that I'm in the 50s, almost my 60s, I have great compassion for my high school football coach. I think about what he was going through at that time in his life. Um, I probably couldn't say that in my 20s and 30s. I was probably a little bit bitter towards him, which is a pretty immature, uh, feeling. I think back now and I'm embarrassed how I felt towards him.
Mm.
Would have had more Christ-like faith and compassion for the man. Um, he, at his core, he was a good man. I just think he was going through some things that obviously, as a high school kid, you don't understand. You're too dumb. To be honest, you just don't understand it. And I look back, and he was a good man. I had a lot of good coaches and teachers. Um, it was confusing for me, I guess, in the 80s. I'm the oldest of 12.
Wow.
My parents are my dad has passed, um, very strong Christians. Dad was ahead of his time. Literally, our family just, when we talk about dad, we're amazed at what he saw biblically. So he saw things that we had no idea. And to be quite frank, we thought he was crazy. Now it's 2025 and you're like, holy mackerel. Um, but when you're the oldest, I think, Jacob, and you're going through, and my parents had just moved back, but my dad grew up in Caledonia. My mother did not. She grew up in Portage, Wisconsin. And you're the trailblazer, right? And I get a little bit of pushback from some of my teammates, classmates, or friends that they don't see it this way. But I saw our school as a dope school, and I was extremely scared of it. There was a lot of partying, the way I remember it. Um, it was just a rough time. But again, um, I don't know. I get it now. Now that I'm almost 60, the reason I went through that is I think so that I would have more of a mindset of, man, we got to keep this stuff away from our kids.
Mm.
We lost friends, be it mentally, being burnt out for the rest of their lives, or they're in their early 20s, they became alcoholics. And, right, the older you get, Jacob, the less judgmental you are. You understand that they're searching for love, they're looking to belong.
Mm.
And yeah, you know, now that I'm almost 60, I would say I wouldn't change a thing. But if you were to ask me this 15 years ago, I would have said, I sort of probably would have ranted and raved a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a good point you make, and even just when you're young and when you're in high school, you can make decisions without understanding that a lot of that stuff can follow you into adulthood and impact the rest of your life, whether it be alcohol, drugs, gambling, um, you
Mindset,
know,
what kind of
yeah,
mindset you have. We have our, you know, talk. Actually, the day that you're coming down, that Sunday, we'll go through everything with our program. And one of the things I talk about is how many of you know alcoholics, or guys my age that still act like they're 17.
mm,
And we talk about what that does to the brain, and how 60-year-old men will still act like they're 17. And we know now by the science that alcohol and those drugs retread their brain and their
yeah,
stuff. You see this look out of the guy's eyes, and when they raise their hands. Sometimes I ask them to raise their hands. Other times I'm like, just take a mental note. It doesn't mean they're bad guys, but they're 60 years old and they still want to act like they're 17. My
yeah,
dad always used to talk about, there comes a time when a young man, you can't be a child, right? It's the old, when I believe Paul talks about, in my youth, I thought like a little boy, and then as I got older, I think like a man, right? I'm
yeah,
butchering it, but you know what I'm trying to say there. And there comes a point where you got to grow up, and I
yeah,
don't know that we talk to our kids enough about that.
mm,
I'm not saying don't have good fun, but You can't
Yeah.
life isn't about fun all the time.
Mm,
Um, I heard a quote from one of the guys that I really like to follow. Comfort is the new drug, and I think that's
mm,
really true, Jacob. And
yeah.
that's for all of us, right? We all got to fight that. Being comfortable. You got to do hard stuff, right? Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm sort of off on a rabbit trail there, Jacob. Get me back on.
No, that's good. I think sometimes I like to tell young people it's like instead of thinking that at a certain age you'll become the person you want to be, you're building the person that you will be in the future
Hmm.
right now. And when you think like that, it can help as you make decisions even at a younger age. So bring us into your world a little bit, when you're in high school and figuring out next steps in your life. What did that look like, and how did you kind of go from there to getting into coaching and your career? Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying the episode, I want to ask you to go on whatever platform you're on and follow and subscribe. Give us a rating and review us and help this podcast reach more people. You can head to the website 1020words.com/DYA. That's TEN20words.com/DYA to learn more about us, check out our merchandise, or figure out how you can have me come speak to your team or program, or potentially be a guest on the podcast. I look forward to connecting with you. Let's get back into the episode.
Wow. So I was young, not very smart. Um, I knew I wanted to marry Becky. I was a little bit confused, right, on how to do that. I thought I still wanted to play college football. Like I said, I wasn't very good. I wasn't anything special. I could run. Um, so I walked on to Winona State. Um, Enjoyed it for a while, but again, my parents didn't want me to go to college. Um, I didn't really. It was more the Christian thing, worrying about the partying, worrying about getting, believing things that weren't Christian.
Mm,
So I didn't really have a lot. I didn't have a lot of sport, and I don't want to make that against my parents. Their hearts were in the right spot. Um, I just, I was too young to know how to fight it.
yeah.
I remember me and a buddy going to a lecture that we had to go to, and the professor was talking about how she hated the competitive spirit and winning, and it shouldn't matter and blah blah blah. And I wasn't mentally ready to handle that, and I literally walked out,
Mm,
and I just this besides the football wasn't for me, and I was sort of a walk on, and I wasn't prepared for that. And again, that's as I look back, that's nobody's fault but mine, you know.
mm,
So I came back to Caledonia, got some, you know, blue collar jobs, and married Becky, thank God, and my my head basketball coach, my junior high football coach, wanted to know if I wanted to come and work at the school as an EA, and if I wanted to become a assistant basketball coach. And I'm like, sure, and I was a little bit shocked because I saw myself as a knucklehead, and thank God, Ken Vandenboom, got me the job at the high school, and sort of dove in, being an assistant coach for Chris Fadness, the legendary basketball coach that, we won a state title at Caledonia. Then he went to Austin. And then I talked my way onto the staff of Mark Frayling. Um, uh, so, thank God he took me.
Yeah. Now, was he your coach?
No, no, Mike, no,
Okay.
no, he was not my coach. No.
Got it.
So,
So how'd you convince them to let you become a football coach?
well, so I was actually I take that back. I was a junior high coach for Ken Vanderboom. He was our head basketball coach. Um, and then as we went through coaches, I think I did a good job of showing them that I really cared. I had a lot of passion, and Mark just sort of, I don't know, took a chance on me. Maybe he saw, he probably saw something in me that I didn't recognize. So um, yeah, I remember we were talking at a restaurant. We were both out to eat, our families, and yeah, I'll think on it. And then he just offered me the ninth grade job, and again, I wasn't very good at it, but I enjoyed it, and I wanted to get better, and Mark wanted to get better, and we had a bunch of guys that were just sort of learning, and yeah, we were not very smart. X's and O's, we weren't smart, um, but we wanted to be better. And the one thing I learned from Mark was that he had a very compassionate heart, really cared about everybody, and it was
Hmm.
really, really evident.
Yeah.
That's what attracted me to him.
Yeah. So where where is transition from, hey, do you want to be a coach and being like, well, I guess, to you kind of realizing you're gonna do this
Yeah,
for
well, I actually knew when I was a junior I wanted to be a high school football coach.
okay.
So when Ken offered me the ability to get in the school system, I jumped at it.
Yeah.
Um, so I knew I wanted to be a coach. I just, I'm being really honest, Jacob. I just didn't know a lot. I didn't understand the verbiage, uh, just the football verbiage at that time. That's not what we used when I was in high school. Was
Mm.
you know, we didn't understand technique. Like the one a three technique and a one technique. We had no idea of that stuff. And again, not being critical. It's again, you only have so much time. You got to get things through to kids, right? Boys have a hard enough time concentrating. So I'm not trying to
Right.
be critical. I just said I would literally go to football clinics and I'd be like, they're speaking Latin to me. I have no idea. But I would keep taking notes and I would keep trying to figure it out. And I remember early in my career, Mark Fraley took our staff and he decided we're going to go to Augustana, South Dakota, and we're going to just spend time with their staff. And we got to the point where we had this old cowboy. I don't even remember his name. He was a cowboy coach for Augustana. He had a cowboy hat. And he had boots on, and he was all fired up. And finally, Mark and I and the other coaches, we just sort of admitted we don't know what you're talking about. We don't understand any of this football jargon. Mark had played at a college, but they didn't use that verbiage. And he looked at us and he's like, "All right, thanks for being honest." So he just, I should remember the guy's name, Jacob, but he just sort of broke down football to us and football, verbiage and yeah, I don't know. It was a great, I was assistant coach for Mark for 10 years. I always tell everybody I could have been his assistant coach forever. He was just a great,
Mm.
great family.
So with under Mark, you guys did some winning. Is that correct?
Well, on and off. I mean, we were typically below 500 or right at 500. Um, Again, Caledonia was a different place. If you ever talk to Mark Esch,
Yeah.
and you read his book, I mean, it was just a heavy party town. It's just
Yeah.
people get offended because you talk about it, and I'm always like shocked. I'm like, well, so do we just want to lie about it? And let's be honest, every community, if you got any German, Irish, Norwegian heritage, we're all fighting it. So let's just admit it, and let's try to limit, the access to our kids. Let's, we see, as alcoholism become a less problem or more of a problem? The answer is it's become more. Do we
Mm.
want our kids to become alcoholics? Do we want them to, I don't want that. And again, now we're not talking anything about football or being a great athlete. We're
Yeah.
talking about we just want them to live clean, good lives. Now, again, was saying that, Jacob, I have a beer once in a while, right?
Yeah.
But I
Right.
learned you got to wait, right? And anyway, it was just a different time in Caledonia. And
Yeah.
um, as I recall, maybe Mark will chew my butt for saying this, but Mark Frayling, he left for a couple reasons, and mostly was he didn't want his sons and his daughter to be raised in an environment where alcohol was a big, big, big deal.
Yeah. So when he left, you guys, I'm trying to piece
Yep.
the timeline together. So had you guys, did you win a state championship with him? So
Uh,
you took over a
we
middle
got
of the
close. I would
road.
say. Well, excuse me. We got where we almost won a section title.
Okay.
And that was Mark's senior year, Mark Esch's senior year with
Yeah.
Brent Peter, Jed Hommel, those type of guys. Great, great athletes. But we ran into a real tough Zimbrota Mazeppa team, and that was as close as we got. Was a section title, I believe, just 1 year out of the 10. Now again, we had great kids, Jacob, but we were learning. It's where I came up with a lot of my philosophies of if I ever get a chance, this is what I'm going to change. This is what I'm going to do. And again, not being critical. It's just
Yeah.
like I tell my son Isaac, you got to learn as much as you can from Bubba and Eric Schmidt and whoever you're under, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then when you get your opportunity, here's what I want to do. What they did. Here's what I want to do different. So that's what I
Yeah.
was sort of doing in my head with. And to be honest, Jacob, I never thought I'd have the shot. I never thought I'd have a shot. But I wanted to be ready if I did get a shot. So I was with Mark for 10 years, and then Mark left to Farmington, did a great job up there as their football coach. I believe Mark is, I mean, he just sent me a text a couple weeks ago. I believe he's still their awesome chemistry teacher. Um,
Cool.
yeah. One of
Yeah.
the things I learned from Mark, if I can say this, Jacob, I don't
Yeah.
want to over talk you, or if you
Go
want,
ahead.
yeah, just, I remember Mark and I and Chris Fadness, our basketball coach, after Ken stepped down, you could argue with those guys in their room. I mean, it was fabulous. We'd scream at each other, we'd yell at each other like this is the way it should be done, or this is what needs to happen. But when you left the room, you did what Mark Frayling or Chris Fadness wanted to do because
Mm.
they were in charge, and they let you argue your point and make your suggestion, and they would listen to you, and then they would make their mind, which they should. And Mark was just and Chris, they were both just awesome at it. And then we had a couple coaches going through some life problems, and I'm embarrassed to say this, but I remember being so judgmental, so get rid of him, get rid of him, get rid of him. And
Mm.
Mark would just look at me and like, Carl, we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
Then the older I got, I'm like, wow, what compassion, what heart for people. It was really,
Mm.
it was
I
really good.
think you're making a really important point that I want to pull out is you spent 10 years as an assistant coach, and I don't think you or anyone else knew that you would go on to do amazing things as a head coach, which I know But really, I mean, I think the lesson here is whatever position you're in is making the most of that position, even if it's not where you want to be. And you said you were content being an
Mhm.
assistant coach, but maybe somebody is going to be in a job where you're not, that's not ultimately where you want to be, whether it's football or whether it's life. But what can you learn in the season you're in that's going to prepare you for the next season? Because if you
Yeah.
just sat around, if you're an assistant coach and you sit around like, oh, I wish I was head coach and blah, 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 once you become the head coach, if you haven't made the most of your time as an assistant, you're going to be a terrible head coach. I mean, so,
Yeah. I mean, that's a great point, Jacob. Like for me, of course, I loved Mark, but I wanted to coach because I wanted to help kids. Again, the assistant coach positions are so important. I mean, your best coaches have to be the seventh and eighth grade, the ninth grade.
mm,
The toughest times, like when a young boy is like, "Why am I playing football? I'm getting beat up, or I'm not that strong, or I'm not that fast." And you got to have a coach just hang in there, hang in there. You're doing great. You're doing great. You're only a ninth grader. And to me, it was all about right. We're supposed to be a servant, right? The servant leadership. That to me is Christ. And that's what we're supposed to be doing. This isn't about, well, Mark Frayling's football team or, Carl Fruechte's football team. This is our football team. And the big thing I hear from coaches that call me or talk to me is, I can't get my assistant coaches to do anything and it's all about them and they don't want to help and they don't want to do this. I'm like, I guess we got to challenge them and just say, why are you coaching?
mm,
You're just coaching for, it's nice to love and be motivated by the head coach. Don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, you're coaching for these kids, and it seems to me, Jacob, like a lot of people are missing that. It's about doing the best you can for that young man on the football field to make him a better human being.
mm,
And again, I had some pretty good role models from Ken Vandenboom to, a lot of our coaches in our high school to, Mark Frayling and Chris Fadness, and then the assistant coaches that were under them. So uh, I personally, Jacob, think our country's got to get back. We got to get back to what are we doing this for? I mean,
mm,
obviously, we all want to win state titles. That to me is a no brainer. Just
yeah,
you know, we're competitive people by nature.
yeah, yeah. But I like what you said about football or whatever sport or whatever it is. It has to be about developing the human being because winning a state championship, I'm sure it's awesome, but it's not gonna solve problems in your marriage, right? I mean, you can't ride that the rest of your life.
Yeah, I
And
believe. Yeah, I believe.
unless, go
Who's the
ahead.
people that just won the British Open? Um, he's on record of just saying, and he's one. I guess he's the world's best. I heard it on radio just yesterday that he's like, you win, it's over, and then it's like, half an hour later, he's ready. It moves on. And I thought it was really cool. The sports writer or the sports guy on the radio didn't. He couldn't get it, but I got exactly what he was talking about. And is it Scotty Schaefer or something like that?
Oh yeah, Scheffler.
I'm, I'm probably butchering it, Jacob, but
Yeah.
it was a great point that, yeah, it's bigger than that. And, the other thing I think that our country's missing is, like we got a lot of kids that love basketball and wrestling, baseball and track, and that's great. We encourage that. The good Lord makes you so you can give your best in everything, and we got to get back to helping one another. Like, okay, I love football. Come on out and help me. And I'll come out for the wrestling team or the basketball team or whatever, and just to be with my buddies and to help one another, and then to compete and to work as hard as you can. Young people got to be told that again. You're going to be okay. It's a 2-hour practice, and yeah, okay, maybe sport X isn't your best, but you can learn to do this for your friends, your buddies, your community, because right, it isn't always fun raising your children. There's bad days or there's tough times, and not everything is peaches and cream, and you gotta do some hard stuff once in a while.
Yeah, that's a great point. Take me into, I know, you don't want to break or anything, but take me into some of the process of, and then after this question, we're gonna pivot into a little more about your faith because I want to hear about that too. But before we get there, take me into taking over a middle of the road program to kind of a record setting team winning multiple state championships. What are some of the big things that you would attribute that success and transformation to as far as, how you create that culture, what changed? Uh, Take us into a bit of that.
Well, first of all, before I get into that, Jacob, I do want to make this very clear. Mark did a great job of, really running over the weeds for me. You know what I mean
Yeah.
by that? He just sort of
Yeah.
blazed a trail. And, um, I'm always very grateful to him for that, because he gave me an opportunity as a ninth grade and then the D coordinator to make my mistakes and to do things. And so, I mean, I don't want to, I want to make this very clear. Without Mark, I don't believe we have our success, right?
Yeah.
Well, it became very clear to me that we had to have a true culture in the weight room. We had to have, I believe in speed. The thing I love about football is the speed and the angles of the game. That's what I always loved playing about it. That's what brought me joy, was somebody trying to catch me or tackle me. So I've always been a big proponent of speed and the and now the weight room. And it became really clear to me, Jacob, that the community, excuse me, has to be behind you.
Mm.
A lot of coaches out there are doing the right stuff. The community is too busy backbiting, fighting, complaining, um, not supporting. At the end of the day, parents don't have the right, or community, or even the superintendent or the principal or the AD. You don't have a right to sit there and I think you ought to run this offense, or I think you ought to run this defense, or I think you ought to have this, weight room or speed. Just be quiet. That's the coach's decision. He gets to run what he wants to run. Where parents and people have the right to complain is if he's an unethical, bad moral, lazy piece of garbage. Then, yeah,
Yeah.
get rid of it. But other than that, how about people be quiet and help your coach and help your kids and support your kids instead of bad mouthing the coach all the time? And
Mm.
until we start addressing this, we're going to see the cycle of rotating coaches because it's getting relentless. And if your community can say all they want, but they got to be behind the football coach or the wrestling, the basketball, the baseball, the track, whatever it is. Quit complaining and start helping them in a positive way. And I don't think Mark got the support he needed, in my opinion. I thought it was a bear for me right away, to be honest. I think people also have to understand this is going to ruffle some feathers, but I don't care, Jacob. A lot of times schools just say they want to win. They don't want to win. They just want to create less problems. Don't bother me. I don't want something showing up on my desk. A lot of administration does not understand what it truly takes to win. And they can tell you all they want. They want you to win, but they don't want to really give you full support. And
Mm.
that bothers people because, well, my superintendent or my principal or my school board says, yeah, yeah, yeah. People do a lot of talking and they don't do much action.
Mm.
So I had to work through that, and I got to the point where I would get a roadblock and I would just go off the road and go around them, or just ignore it, or okay, guess I can't do that, and then I'd find another way to accomplish our goals. And I think that's hard for a lot of coaches, and then we decided that we were going to faith, family, football, or athletics. In our meeting we always call it athletics. This is to me what our priorities should be. We say athletics because, again, like I said earlier, some people love basketball or wrestling, baseball or track more than football, and that is totally cool. But you were made to give 100% in everything you do. So I expect 100% in football. And so we tried to make that a highlight. Friday night's a highlight, and I don't mean just the Friday night. It was the Saturday through Thursday. Are you doing everything you can to make yourself ready for Friday? Are you really making that a priority? And then, of course, after athletics, of course, is school. Kids need to understand, yeah, you may not like English, but you need to do the best you can in English. And that English teacher takes his English like I take football. And so you may not like it. I hated English, but I had a great English teacher and love him to death. He was a great man. Mr. Ken Wright, became one of our biggest supporters. You just got to do it. It's just the way it is, right? It's not against your faith. It's not against your morals. Get your English done, so you got to explain it to them that way. Cause again, they're young.
Yeah.
I was there. So.
No, I love that because you see, when this comes out, this will be old news, but just to give an example, there's this big trending thing about a CEO being caught on camera having an affair, and it's all over the internet. But I think that just is a big example of what so many people do, where you compartmentalize and you can win in one area of your life. Like, you could be a CEO, but you're losing in your marriage, in your morality. And at that point, what's the point? And so that idea of whatever I do, I'm giving 100%. School, football, my community, because that's what's actually going to matter. Who cares if you're the best player or even you're the best at math or whatever, but you've compartmentalized that, and that's not just who you are in everything. That's what actually matters. How did you said you talked about the weight room speed, and we can get into that, but how did you go about getting the community behind you? Because you said that's been one of the pillars. Hey man, cool shirt. Oh, thank you, man. What is that logo? I've never seen it before. Yeah, it's actually based on 1 Timothy 4:8, which says physical training is good, but training in godliness is better, having value in this life and the next. The 8 is like an infinity, because when you have a relationship with God, it lasts forever. Oh, you believe in Jesus or what? Yeah, bro, I play the game all for God's glory. He changed my life, and I want to do what I can to glorify him. Is it a brand, or whose logo is that? Yeah, it's actually the theme verse for a cool podcast I listen to called Dear Young Athlete. It's a sports leadership podcast. You should check it out. So where can I get one? Yeah, you just go to their website, 1020words.com/DYA. That's ten20words.com/DYA. If you use the code DYA20 with all caps, you can get 20% off your first order. They have t-shirts, shorts, hoodies, crew necks, you name it, anything you want. Yeah, man, I mean, I guess I would like to learn more. Oh, yeah, man, we got Bible study later with some of the guys if you want to come check it out. All right, bro. See you later. All right, bro. Peace.
Yeah. Um, so it was a problem right away because you have a lot of graduates from the 70s and the 80s, and in the 80s we had what was called the Universal Gym. Wasn't I was like one of two, three guys that would sneak in to use the Universal Gym. Um, if you know what that is, you're really old. It wasn't really the best, but it was something. Um, Really, the way we broke it down is we started. Mark got some. We were a BFS program when Mark took over, or when Mark started it, and you know there are a lot about percentages, blah blah blah, right? But it seemed to me that what you had to do was again convince young people the science behind it and how it was going to make you a better athlete. I think a lot of people back in the day would confuse uh, strength training with bodybuilding because they'd be like, well, you're going to be uncoordinated. Well, what people didn't realize is they were doing bodybuilding stuff, not realizing what they were doing. Olympic lifting, powerlifting, that makes, a body ballistic, strong, right? And so, you're not going to be uncoordinated. So we gradually, worked through that. To be honest, it was a hit and miss with the weight room. My long time, Ernie Hodges, he was our volunteer, was until he retired last year. He started with Mark and he'd been with me. We are great friends. Um, Ernie would break down the science and, we'd get 3, 4, 5, Mark Esch and his buddies would lift actually in Ernie's garage. Then we slowly took over the stage at the high school. And then we got to where with the help of a whole bunch of great business, small construction companies, we built a weight room off of our old high school. And, it just, you get 5 or 6, 7 guys and finally, Ernie and I just sort of brainstormed when when we took over and we decided to make it part of practice.
Mm.
Boy, was that hard. Because you're like thinking, I only have this amount of time for football, but we gotta convince these guys. And that's what we did. We um, started with, first thing we do is, we warm up and we do our speed and then we do our weight room and then we go into football and we're done by 5:30, 5:43, So if you think about that, you're really on the hop. Practice starts at 3 and you're done by 5:45 roughly. So it just became where the weight room became a cool thing. And, and then as we went into the off hours or the off season, excuse me, we would open it up in the mornings because again, we wanted kids wrestling and playing basketball and doing baseball and track and golf. So, and then it just became a cool thing, Jacob. Certain classes, really took to it, and so
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're making a good point here too about leadership. And you
mhm.
mentioned being a servant leader, and I'm also hearing I think a leader goes first. So when nobody can really see the vision, the leader makes it happen. And then once people see that, they'll get behind you, and I'm sure it took support to build the
Mhm.
weight room and that stuff. You said you have businesses who supported you. Well,
I think the other thing too, Jacob, that young coaches have to realize is you're going to have a lot of naysayers. I took a lot of arrows in the back. I knew that, but it just never really bothered me. Um, I knew there was people bad mouthing me around town, and you either right, you got to stand for something. I had a coach tell me a year ago, Carl, you are either loved or hated. Yep, I like it that way. I'd rather be
mm,
that than lukewarm, right? So
that's how Jesus was, right?
yeah, and of course I'm not going there with him.
Right.
But I'm just saying you got to stand for something, right, Jacob? And um, it's just people are very opinionated. They don't, let's be honest, 99% of them don't understand the speed world. They don't understand the weight room. Um, again, that's where you have to have faith and trust. I think that's the biggest thing that is really hitting our country.
Mm,
Athletes got to trust coaches. Coaches got to trust your athletes. And once that comes together, you got beautiful stuff there. And you know, it's just the way it is. Young coaches got to be, people are going to question you. Just answer them and move on, or don't answer them and just keep moving on. So,
yeah. I could talk about this all day, but I won't. But when you think about the weight room, it's about so much more than
mm,
getting stronger.
yes,
Obviously, being physically stronger is going to help you win. But what's really happening is the bonding, the
just the
sweat,
brotherhood. Yeah, the
the
brotherhood.
brotherhood, sweat
Doing hard stuff
equity.
together. Yep, yep. And Jacob, too. I think something that we've done from the beginning is all this sort of stuff is. I know you're 17 and you feel like you're indestructible. I'm thinking about you when you're 57, 67. You want to be able to bend. You want to be able to move. You want to have a clear brain. You don't want Alzheimer's. We talk a lot about, blueberries, blackberries. If my kids will listen, we talk a lot about, it's not just about being ready on the football field. It's about taking care of yourself. And I believe everybody should be doing some form of physical activity and
Mm,
should be eating right. It's not just about being a great football player.
yeah. And I think one of the biggest kind of last things about the weight room is what it's really about is investment. And if you invest $1 million into a business, you're really gonna want to see it succeed, right?
Mm,
You're not gonna give up on it easily because you're deeply invested. And when you've invested time into the weight room, all of a sudden on Friday night, you want it a little bit more.
mhm. You're not going to
Er,
just give in. Right on. You're right on. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly right, Jacob.
So just if I can pivot a little bit, you've talked about faith being the foundation of your program, of your family, of who you are. Take us kind of into your faith story, some of the big moments, and kind of how you see your faith impacting you today.
So I make it very clear to the boys that you'll get what I mean by this. And I let them know, hey, I'm not a perfect Christian. When I mess up, I'm gonna let you guys know. Um, I don't want no, he says this, but he does this because every once in a while, you know, you get a little angry or you say something you really wish you wouldn't have said, right? And I'm going to call myself out on it. So I'm a I'm a fallen Christian that keeps trying to just keep climbing the ladder, right? I believe that's what Christ wants. But obviously, I got to go back to my mom and dad. Um, you know, um, Dad being the leader of our family, of course, with the support of our mother. Dad was just wasn't perfect either, but he was a great example. He was always into his Bible. He was always reading. He made it very clear to us that King Jesus is the only way to heaven. Um, he was extremely passionate, and I'll be honest, at times when we were young, we thought he was crazy, you know. And I mean that with all love and respect. But then you'd come around and you'd think about it, and I had my stupidity moments in high school where, but I always, had that voice in the back of my head, like, Carl, you shouldn't be doing this or you shouldn't be doing that, right? And that all goes back to your mom and dad, and you know, I always talk about, Mark Ash wrote a nice book. It was very humbling. I actually didn't want him to do it. It was about our program, about his time. And I always tell him, for me, the moment I probably, I'm not going to say probably, I'm going to say I wasn't as close to Christ as I needed to be in my late teens to most of my 20s. Not that I was running around partying or doing things. I mean, Becky and I have never been big drinkers. Not that we were doing sinful thing. I mean, we were being, we sin, I sinned, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't like we were partiers or running around or doing that type of stuff. But I knew in my heart that we weren't close enough to Christ. We weren't reading the Bible like we should have, if that makes sense. And I told Mark Ash that I felt like I made football my God.
Mm.
Um, and I'm pointing out, Becky and I bought a house that was, what are we, 3, 4 blocks away from our old high school. I never envisioned this new school, so it was easy walking distance for me and the family to practice, to school, and so on. And I remember walking the practice field down where Mark Ash practiced and played. And I remember walking it one day, just really frustrated. Why can't I get people to do this? Why can't I get people to do that? It was another 3 or 4 guys at the weight room. I remember pacing the field, Jacob, and I was thinking in my head, and I'm a huge history guy. I love ancient history. I love books. I love history of football. I love history. And I'm like, who's the greatest coach ever? And, of course, Woody Hayes, Bear Bryant, all these guys, Vince Lombardi. And I had read all their stuff. And then I'm like, well, wait a second. Who's the greatest teacher? And then you start thinking about that. And then you're, well, wait a second. The greatest teacher ever was Jesus Christ. And it just sort of hit me. But not everybody follows the greatest teacher ever, unfortunately. And he's Jesus Christ. And I'm just this silly little hillbilly coach from bottom of Shively Hill who's just trying to work a two-way football program. And I'm like, who do you think you are? And I know it was the Holy Spirit telling me your priorities are all out of whack. Mm-hmm. And I just remember walking and I just remember I had to walk. I'm just like, who do you think you are? And, you got to get your life in order, and you got to get your priorities in line. And yeah, um, I think that was the start of me of just figuring it out and getting my priorities. And yeah, it just from, things are still stressful, right, Jacob? Because you want to do a good job for everybody. You want to help people as much as you can. But that for me was the turning point for me, where it's like, okay, all right, God's got this. Who do I think I am? And get your priorities right. And I'm viewed as a very passionate man, and I won't apologize for that. Sometimes people think I go overboard, but to me, again, that's a Christ-like attitude. Um, again, not saying that I'm doing it always right, but for me, that was the turning point for me, Jacob, with my faith. And Becky and I then started doing a better job. Not great, but we started doing a better job. We started doing a better job for our kids. And I think I started doing a better job for our football players.
Mm.
So For me, it's been a journey, for us and our family, and I think, right, it's always supposed to be a fight to a degree because you're fighting the world, and
Yeah. Yeah. You said something that I want to extract. There's a there's an irony where you might think if you make football your god, you're gonna do better at football.
Mhm,
But you had this moment of realizing your priorities were out of line
mhm,
and begin to reprioritize. And somebody may think, well, that can't be good for football if all of a sudden you're going to prioritize, faith and family. But the reality is that's when you become better as a human and you find, oh, when I'm closer to God, I'm a better father, husband, and now all of a sudden I'm a better coach because of my faith. So it's like it's kind of upside down of what people might think.
mhm. Well, that's what the devil does to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, well said.
Um, the other thing I just love is like it's not about getting it all right or being perfect. And I even would say to people like, and this is not just me, I think it's backed by science if you really look it up. Don't try and change everything all at once. People get to the new year and they say,
Mhm,
New Year, I'm going to read the Bible, I'm going to work out, I'm going to eat healthy, I'm going to, be a better friend and blah, blah, blah. And then after a week or 2 weeks, you're totally burned out.
yeah, it's too much.
Right.
Too much.
Just try one thing,
Mhm.
you know,
Keep reading your
like,
Bible because then it's going to fix all the other stuff.
right,
You're
right.
going to read your Bible, and somebody might say, "Well, how is that going to help my health?" Real easy. You're going to want to drink better. Going to want to eat better. You're going to want to exercise a little more because now you understand my body's a temple for the Holy Spirit.
Yeah,
But you got to start there.
yeah. And you get momentum, right? And it's
Mhm.
like,
And I think the other thing too, Jacob, that people don't understand, in my humble opinion, you never fully arrive. I,
yeah,
I'm not a big believer in that. I think it's a constant struggle. It's a constant journey, and the sooner we come to realization like that, yeah, it actually when hey, I'm a Christian, and you try to be Christ like, the devil's going to come at you harder.
yeah,
He's not backing off. He's actually going to go harder, and you have to understand your enemy and understand there's going to be bad days or bad weeks, and you get out of that funk as fast as you can, whatever it is. So,
yeah.
um, yeah, that's the way I believe.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times if you can take small steps in the right direction, your whole life can change, not overnight, but
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden you look back in a few years
Mm-hmm.
and your whole life has changed just by small changes. And I think that's why I'm such an advocate of the weight room. And in my life, it's like I remember you walk in going into freshman year, and the seniors are lifting huge weights,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, oh, I'm never going to be able to
Mm-hmm.
do that. Just in my high school, if you could power clean 230 pounds, they put your name on a wall.
Hmm.
And you think I'll never make it. And then for me it was like then I made it on there my
Hmm.
junior year
Yeah.
just because it didn't happen overnight, right? It happened over years of consistency. And that's such a picture, I think, of having faith and following Christ is like, hey, just be consistent. You're gonna fail, you're gonna mess up, but if you keep showing up,
Mhm.
you're gonna end up in a much better place.
Right on.
When it comes to thinking about your players and you know what you really would want them to hear about your faith in Jesus, or why consider, you know, following Jesus, what would that be for you?
For my players, I want them just to know that first of all, my King Jesus is a true warrior. Um, I think people should go to Revelation, and my guy's on the white horse. He's not the guy on the cross, and the guy on what he did on the cross. I mean, who can explain that? I mean, you know what I mean? Who can? That's amazing, right? But I think too many young men, they look at Christ and they think of a soft man, and
Hmm.
nothing could be further from the truth, right? So I sort of fast forward them to catch their attention. We know that he's on a white horse, ready. He's just waiting to get the okay to come down and kick some tail.
Mm,
And I mean that with love, but it's he's a man's man, and
yeah.
that's who I follow. That's who my wife follows. That's who our family follows. And he's everything. There is no other way. And
Mm,
people can tell you all you want, but they're wrong. Doesn't mean we hate
yeah.
them. We love them. But
Yeah.
Jesus is the only way. He makes that very, very clear. And I just want my boys to be the best Christian, hardworking men they can be for our community or wherever they end up. And
Yeah.
I hope that football has a little bit of help in that process to make them tougher, and mentally tougher, physically tougher, and but yet compassionate, right?
Yeah.
You can be a tough guy and be compassionate and be caring.
Mm, yeah.
My two
Yeah.
grandsons were with us when we went to North Dakota football camp, and I'm way up in the front of the bus, and my grandsons are way back in the bus, and our boys, and somebody can say, well, of course they treated them well, coach. It's your grandsons, but we have a youth program every Saturday, Jacob, and our kids do an amazing job. Um, they love those kids. They treat those kids well. Um, and we got to talk about it the next day. I'm just like, how did Duke and Otto look at you guys? And they're like, they just loved us and looked up to us. I'm like, exactly. Look at the power that you have with your actions.
Hmm.
Act like a jerk, or you talk bad, or you say things that you shouldn't be saying that they hear. It's not good. It's not cool. And
Yeah.
just really proud of our young people. Just do a great job. Two of our players, Will and Cooper Allen, uh, we have the Bonzi family is a awesome family in our area, and they're doing some. They're taking care of some kids. Let me just leave it at that. And Will Allen was helping his girlfriend with one of the boys, and Cooper had a little, I think it was a 2 or 3 year old in his car pretending to drive. And they were doing that all alone. When I came out of the school, that's what I got to see because I had weight room at the end of practice. And I tell you what, Jacob, that just makes you like, all right, okay, these are some
Yeah.
good boys. These are some good kids. And
Yeah.
tons of our kids do that. And it's really, they're now these are some tough kids here. They're our competitors. They're
Yeah.
And to see their compassion for young kids is just really makes my heart swell.
Well, I love that because as humans, we're looking for significance. You
Mm-hmm.
know, we're wondering, do I matter? And so I think football is a beautiful picture that you do matter, you know, and what I love about football is you need every shape and size person
Right on.
all working together for a common goal. And you realize I have to do my job on a given play or it's not going to work. In other words, I am significant. And even if you're a scout team player,
Mm-hmm.
you are significant
Yeah, you got to
to,
have everybody.
yep. But I think what you're saying too is like, you know, these players on your team, well, they were very significant to your grandkids in that
Mm-hmm.
moment. And I think sometimes people don't act the way they should because they don't realize how significant their actions are. Whether you have whether you have a million social media followers or zero, the way you act impacts the people around you. And you are significant. Everyone is significant. And when we realize that, we all of a sudden you want to be better, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you realize, hey, I play left tackle and my quarterback relies on me to make the block, all of a sudden you're gonna want to do it better. And the same is true in life when you realize, hey, choices I make affect the people around me. I want to make better choices.
Mm-hmm. And
So,
a lot of our kids are blessed. They have great parents, but I think it's important for teachers and coaches and other adults to back that up and let them know, hey, it is cool. I think that's important right now.
yeah. So I have really one more question and then a closing statement, but I have a saying, you know, I say growing up, I thought life was all about sports. I
Mm-hmm.
know now sports are all about life.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many lessons we learn in football that apply to life. But if you had to kind of pick your favorite one, a lesson from football you've seen true in your life, what would that be and how have you seen it?
Well, I'm gonna say two things here. I think football, like no other sport, relies on trust. And if you don't have trust, you're not going to have a great football team. Um, some of the other sports, I'm not saying it's not important, but because of the physicality and guys going 11 on 11 or 9 on 9 or 8 on 8, whatever, wherever we're at, whoever's listening, 6 on 6. I heard about a friend of ours just had his son played 6 on 6 football in Texas. I was like, wow. So, but it comes down to trust. And I don't think, again, that we talk enough about that. I got to trust my buddy. I got to trust my teammates. I got to trust that they're going to do their job on their side of the line. The other thing I think that football, right, it's such a high energy, things happen so fast. And we talk about this like in the middle of practice, I'll just point at a guy and say, your wife was in a car accident. What are you going to do? And they'll look at you and they're like, I'm not going to freak out. I'm going to calm down. I'm going to calm her down on the phone and I'm going to find a way to see if she needs help. I'm like, bingo. Hey, your son just has cancer, God forbid. What are you going to do? You have to be the rock. You have to be there for your wife and your child. Are you going to freak out like the rest of the world? And again, don't get me wrong, Jacob, I understand sometimes we get highly emotional, but my point is You as the husband is going to have to think and calm and be the rock to lead your family in a time of great adrenaline. And to me, that's football, right? It's adrenaline after adrenaline after adrenaline rush. And how can you handle it? How can you stay calm when you need to stay calm? How can you think under pressure and not freak out? And again, sometimes we do, right? Even as coaches, right? But again, it's about practicing and getting ready for that situation. That to me is some of the things that I really think football brings to our society.
Yeah, that's good. To close, you're on the Dear Young Athlete podcast, and so we end every episode by completing the statement, Dear Young Athlete blank. What would you want to say to your players, to even the teenage Carl? Go for it.
I would say dive into your faith even more. Don't be embarrassed by it. Don't be ashamed by it. Dive into your faith. It's you in a relationship with Christ. It's just you and him. And I wish I would have listened to my dad and done a better job. And I think every young athlete needs to understand that that is more important than pumping weights or doing your speed workout or whatever it is. Dive into your faith and don't be embarrassed.
Love it. Well, I appreciate you sharing your story, sharing your heart. Do you have any last words before we sign off?
No, just honestly, I appreciate getting to meet you, Jacob, getting to learn about you. Appreciate what you do for our state. I think our state of Minnesota is going through some interesting times, so thank God for guys like you. And yeah, it was nice meeting you, seeing you in person, listening to you, and yeah, thank you for what you do.
I appreciate that. If you're still listening, thank you. And we'll see you in the next episode. Peace. And there you have it. One more episode in the books. Thank you so much for listening. As a reminder, make sure you subscribe in whatever platform you're on, that you leave a comment and rate and review. And I want to personally thank you for doing that. And I will see you in the next episode. Peace.